Hello, and welcome to Bedtime Stories with RahSoul. I'm Rah, and this is my book of tales. Tonight, we'll be getting a little bit into the holiday spirit. So, get comfortable, get cozy, and let's get started. Tonight's story is called The Hungry Christmas Tree. The 20-foot tree was magnificent. All 49 wee elves skipped around its base with strings of colored lights, silver tinsel, and finely crafted wooden ornaments. Its fresh piney green scent was intoxicating. The elves buried their faces in the soft needly boughs. The elves giggled like squirrels, chattered like monkeys, and laughed like loons. As the last of the lights were lit and the last of the ornaments hung, the elves discussed the finale, the decoration for the very tip-top. The angel was white, with tinsel hair, pale blue gossamer wings, and a gown sparkling with sugary glitter. She was nearly as tall as the largest elf, though made of paper and very light. A ladder would be of no use. On the highest rung of it, an elf's little arms wouldn't reach across to the treetop. In a velvet blue coat, lined with white fur, Sissy Snowflake put 2 fingers to the corner of her mouth and whistled to get everyone's attentions. Her shrill expulsion blew steam from her pink pointy ears. As the colorful group of wee folks quieted down, she asked them, "Any new ideas this year?" "Why not just get Santa or the missus to do it?" asked Nifty Buttons, pushing his eyeglasses up his tiny pug nose. Bits of peppermint candy and assorted cookies pelted the elf a second later. "Not an option. We do this on our own," Sissy said, with her freckled nose in the air as if daring anyone to argue. A dark-haired elf in a lime green romper said, "We have had some disastrous attempts in the past." A murmur zigzagged through the crowd as they recalled the previous 3 years. The incident with the catapult had left Periwinkle missing her 2 front teeth. It had been painful watching her tackle her supper that night. The drone had flown straight into the top of the tree. It was as if it was a wiring, spitting buzzsaw had been let loose. Branches disintegrated in an explosion of pine needles and tinsel. The poor tree had been decapitated. Marzipan's pet squirrel had been the most traumatizing. It had been trained for a whole month to place the angel just so. And all had gone very well, until the squirrel ate the angel's head. It had been previously made from an acorn. Jingle Bob said, "I think the elf ladder will work this year. Look how big and strong Jingle Mel has grown." The scrawny elf in moss green and yellow moved aside, and his brother stepped up. Jingle Mel was indeed a hulk of an elf. In brown felt and fur, he looked more like a squat, roly-poly troll. As if on cue, the Ginger Spatzel twins leapt onto each of Jingle Mel's sturdy arms. They balanced on 1 foot each and bent like ballet dancers with toes extended, meeting over the burly elf's mop of dark curly hair. Sissy tapped a finger against her pouty pink lips. Yes, I concur. This year, the elf ladder will work just fine." The wee folk bounced over to the front of the tree, clapping and shouting, "Me, me, me," in high-pitched voices like happy blue jays. Sissy strutted back and forth in front of them, pointing and saying, "You, you, you," like a judge at the American Kennel Club. She stopped when she had 20 of them, lined up from the biggest Jingle Mel to the smallest Urchin Poo, an elf of Asian descent, with dark almond-shaped eyes peeking from amidst a froth of pale pink marabou scarves. Her voice was a tiny, tiny one of a mouse. "Yay!" she squeaked. 20 should do it. "Places, everyone," Sissy shouted. One by one, the elves assembled, each smaller than the one before it, climbing onto the shoulders of the elf under it. As Urchin Poo climbed the 19 feet to the top, her understudy, a tiny thing in lavender named Periwinkle, rooted her on. She was frightened of heights and did not want to climb the elf ladder. The ladder swayed as the center elf's foot slipped from the shoulder beneath him. The crowd "ooh," then "ah," as the lines straightened back out. At the top, Urchin Poo regained her own footing, and the paper angel was passed along and up in her direction. Sissy inspected the symmetry and balance of the tree. She was mesmerized by the soft golden lighting and gentle wafting strands of old-fashioned tinsel. A cacophony of squeals and cries broke her trance. She yelled, "Is anyone hurt?" to the tumble of elves before the tree. They were getting to their feet and rubbing bruised bums and elbows and knees. Periwinkle exclaimed, "Where's Urchin Poo?" The elves looked around, and as they spread out, it was clear. The mini pink puffball was not amongst them. They looked under the low-lying branches and ran about calling her name. She was not anywhere in the house either. She had simply vanished. That night at the long supper table, 48 elves sat, with Santa at one end and his missus at the other. They picked at their food and occasionally started conversation that petered out quickly as eyes inevitably wandered to the empty seat 3 down from Mrs. Claus's left. Sissy felt especially awful. She was the unofficial leader of the elves, pretty much, only because of her outspoken, bossy nature, and she felt responsible for each one. At the time of the disappearance, she had decided that Urchin Poo had to be playing a prank. Now, here in the dining room, the elves looked to her for answers, solutions, a game plan perhaps. Santa, king of the elves, said, "Sissy Snowflake, have you any clues? Any progress?" Put on the spot, she suddenly didn't want the attention. She had no answers. She hung her head pretty sadly. "Well, in any case, we still need to complete the tree decorations," Santa said. After supper, the courtyard lanterns were lit, infusing the darkness with welcoming mellow light. 1,000 Christmas lights reflected off the fresh snow. It sparkled as if sprinkled with colorful glitter. The elves formed their elf ladder with little merriment. Little Periwinkle shook with fright as she ascended the tower. Third from the bottom, Boysenberry sneezed. A sneeze could take down the whole lot. They swayed to the left and swayed to the right, then straightened up solidly. Phew! Cuppy Gingerspatzel was the elf at the top. As Periwinkle cautiously climbed her shoulders, Cuppy whispered, "You're doing great, Perry. Just don't look down." Periwinkle had not dared to look down until then. The tower shuddered as Periwinkle lost her footing. Cuppy yelled, "Elf down!" Sissy had been watching the procession, but had taken her eyes off the tiny purple elf when Boysenberry had sneezed. Now she scanned the ground and the tree branches. She called up to Cuppy, "What do you mean? No one fell." Cuppy replied, "Well, she was here for a second. Now she's not. She must have fallen." The elves disassembled and searched the courtyard for the lavender-cloaked elf. Roly, Garapolo, and Jinglemail wheeled out the catapult from the garage. Sissy rolled her eyes and muttered, "Why not?" She stepped aside, watching the foot-high wheels turn. "Wait!" she cried. The catapult was just about to roll over something small and shiny, half buried in the snow. A button, a purple one. Again, it seemed, an elf vanished into thin air. Cuppy's sister Cooperfield climbed up the catapult and planted herself excitedly in the cup. She wore a wooden helmet over her bright copper-colored curls. Only her large brown eyes peeked out. Jingle Bob passed her the paper angel, then positioned himself, ready to press the release lever. Sissy said, "On 1, 2, 3, swish!" Flew Cooperfield through the frosty air. She cried, "Whee!" Her voice cutting off as she disappeared amongst the branches. The paper angel drifted down, seesawing back and forth, wings fluttering as if she were trying to fly like a baby bird falling too soon from its nest. Jingle Mel opened his arms and caught it, cradling it gently. "What the?" said Sissy, blinking. "Did you see that?" Jingle Bob exclaimed. "She's disappeared." Cuppy said, "She must be in the tree. I'm going in after her." Sissy held her back and said, "Something strange is going on here. I can't let you go in." "I don't need your permission. Please, let me help you look." Cuppy nodded, and Sissy called the biggest elves over. She needed them to tip the tree and lay it down on the ground. Ray Ray Goodcandy and his brother Bobo joined Jingle Mel and Jingle Bob. Sissy studied the Good Candy's brothers' faces for 10 full seconds. then narrowed her eyes and furrowed her brows. She asked them, "When you cut this tree down yesterday, where did you get it from?" The good candies looked at each other. Ray Ray sheepishly said, "The North Woods?" Sissy persisted, "Which North Woods?" Bobo said defensively, "It's the best tree ever. We found a forest of perfect Christmas tree. Just a little further than we normally go," added Ray Ray. Sissy said, "You crossed the red field?" "It was no big deal," said Bobo. "Don't get what all the fuss is about," said Ray Ray. "The chocolate was amazing," said Bobo. By now all the elves had gathered and were standing around the tree with their mouths open and their eyes big as ping pong balls. Sissy, exasperated, said, "Santa made a deal with the Red Wizard, who lives in the far north woods. We don't cross his field, we stay out of his forest. In return, he doesn't eat us." "Wait, what chocolate?" Ray Ray said, "We found chocolate," Bobo said, "in the field, like someone had dropped it. A trail into the woods." Sissy exasperatedly looked from brother to brother. "You ninny heads! The wizard must have wanted you to cut down this tree. Through the tree, he's swiping elves. Poor Pooh and Coop and Perry, they've surely been eaten." "We'll go and rescue them," said Bobo. "Santa can help," said Ray Ray. Sissy cried, "Santa cannot hear of this. He will be furious that we broke the oath." "We can go through the tree," said Bobo. "Just like—" "No," screamed Sissy. "We'll be eaten too. We must go the long way, over the field. You'll have to show me exactly which way you went." The three elves headed to the red field at midnight. The night was crystal clear. The stars twinkled merrily, and the moon a lantern that led their way. It was pretty as a Christmas card. Although 2 feet of snow had fallen since the boys' last trip across the field, it was easy to see the ditch that the tree had made as the brothers dragged it home. Sissy grew increasingly nervous. Halfway across, she stopped walking and whispered, "I figured out what's so creepy. There's no sound." The good candy stopped and cocked their heads like terriers, listening to the crinkle of a can opener opening a can. Ray Ray said, "She's right. No owls, no wolves, no crickets, no night jays." A howl arose from the woods ahead of them and east, his woods. It was unlike any sound the three had ever heard. It was similar to a wolf's, but more guttural, higher pitched, and 100% more menacing. Sissy felt every hair on her body stand up and quiver. She held her belly to quiet the rolling worms in it. The boys did the same. "I don't think we should be out in the open like this. Come on." She started running. The boys ran too. The elves' tiny feet blurred over the glistening bluish-white expanse. So swift and light, they left no footprints. They reached the far side in 2 minutes. They leapt into the woods and crouched behind a tree as the eerie howl rose again, closer this time. Cautiously, they continued through the forbidden forest. It was not entirely silent anymore. Branches behind them snapped, snow clumped, flumped as they fell from tree limbs, and deep, ragged breathing trailed their path. As things grew closer, they heard heavy, crumpling footfalls and strange, slurping noises. Lights ahead twinkled through the trees. There, deep in the Red Wizard's forest, was a castle. It was house-sized, but a bona fide castle nonetheless, complete with 2 towers with pointed cone roofs, wide gables over the first-story windows, and a drawbridge over a frozen moat. It appeared to be white frosted glass, with blue crystals embedded all over. The moonlit, sparkling reflections made it appear to be alive and breathing, even though the multi-paned windows were dark. They circled the castle, and around the back they found a maple tree by the silver shiny moat. "Come on," said Sissy. She went to the tree and put her hands together like a step. Bobo stepped up and onto her shoulders. Ray Ray did the same to form an elf ladder. Ray Ray leapt upwards and caught the lowest bare branch. Then he pulled Bobo up, who pulled Sissy next. When they had climbed 20 feet up, they could see into the backyard of the sparkling castle home. "Toss me over the wall," said Sissy. Bobo hung by his feet and took her hands in. He rocked like a swing, back and forth. When he swung towards the wall, he let go of Sissy's hand at the apex. She made her body long like Superman and flew over the wall. She rolled in a ball across the yard, then raced to the back door. Through the window, she saw a cozy, dark kitchen. The door was unlocked. Evil wizards aren't afraid of anything. She tiptoed across the cool tile floor and stopped when she heard soft, whistly snoring. Periwinkle, she thought, for even though the dentist had crafted new teeth, she'd snored ever since the accident. Behind the kitchen door, Sissy found the cage. Her 3 little friends were curled up in blankets. There was a bowl with a few chocolates and a candy cane in it, and another half full of milk. She thought, it's as if they're pets. She rattled the metal doors and called out softly, Perry, Cooper, Archibald, wake up. What? Said one of the girls. Suddenly the kitchen was flooded with brilliant white light. All 4 elves blinked and squinted in surprise. Aha! Shouted the wizard. A trespasser. I shall add you to my collection. Sissy thought, that sure doesn't sound like an evil wizard's voice. She turned around and saw a miniature wizard? It was indeed a child, in purple pajamas with stars and planets all over them. On his head was a tall, pointed hat in a matching pattern. He wore fuzzy purple bunny slippers. Into the cage you go, cried the boy. He was 3 times her size, but she shook her head, refusing to move to the cage. He opened the cage and said, if you don't get into the cage, my grandfather will eat you. Ha ha ha! Who says I eat elves? A voice boomed from the doorway. The tall, white-haired old wizard came into the kitchen and said, what's all the ruckus? He resembled a tall, thinner Santa, but wore a velvet robe so black it sucked in light. He looked angry. His eyes shot red sparks. Now she was scared. Ah, Grandpapa, this one refuses to get in the cage. Well, I don't blame her, to Sissy, he said. You elves have broken the 200-year oath. You are now mine to do what I like with. It was a terrible mistake. The 2 that cut down your elf-eating tree were lured into your forest by chocolate. We are very truly sorry and will do anything to make it up to you. Grandpapa, you can't let them go. They're my pets. Sissy understood then that the child was simply lonely. Wizards weren't famously known for being recluses. The poor child simply wanted playmates. The old scary wizard looked at the boy wizard and said, is that true, Sefton? You lured the elves into the forest with my chocolate? The boy's eyes filled with tears. He nodded. Well, the wizard's face broke into a grin. He then went from scary monster to cheery fun uncle. He said, well then, this is just as much your fault as it is the elves. Please don't send them away, Sefton's small voice quivered. Sissy said, why don't you come over and play with us? Sefton looked up. He sniffled and wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He looked at his grandfather and said, can I? Well, it's odd for a wizard to want to be around other beings. He shuddered and continued, but I can't see any harm if it makes you happy. Oh boy, friends, the young wizard clapped with joy. We've got to get home now before Santa wakes up. He'll be very worried to find 3 more elves missing. 3? asked the big wizard. Oh yes, my friends are out in the maple tree waiting for us. To get back, you'll have to go through the tree portal. The zombie Wolverine that guards the woods is quite fearsome. Sefton threw a rope ladder over the wall. The good candy boys climbed over. The sky was pinking with a new dawning day. There was a tree in the castle yard, identical to the elf's tree, but with fewer decorations and little tinsel. The tall wizard stood on a wooden ladder, and one by one, the elves were tossed into the tree. An hour later, they came back through the tree. When young Sefton, the mini-wizard, came out to meet his new friends, he saw that his own Christmas tree was now sparkling with tinsel, covered in twinkling lights, and at the tip-top sat a beautiful paper angel. The end. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little bit of Christmas cheer. And I hope this taught you to remember that sometimes people are just a little lonely. So extend a little bit of kindness, and you never know what you may get back in return. Happy holidays, sweet dreams.